The snow had that quiet way of falling that makes every sound feel like a secret. Soft, stubborn, endless. Mia pressed her cheek to the wooden door, the grain cold against her skin, as if the house were pretending not to breathe. Beside her, Sophia rubbed her hands together, the tiny knuckles red from the wind that snuck under their sleeves and bit at their wrists. They had left the funeral still dressed in black shoes, black coats that were too thin, black bows in their hair that had already loosened and slipped down. The church bells had stopped hours ago, but every time the wind rose, Mia swore she could still hear them, like a memory that didn't know when to end. "Try again," Sophia whispered. Her voice turned small by the cold. Mia knocked with the care of someone who still wanted to believe in gentleness. 3 times, then once more. Then a 5th that shook her own arm from the effort. The porch light flicked on, but the hallway beyond the frosted glass stayed dark. They waited. The porch boards creaked under their weight, the same creak that used to make their father smile and say, "Hear that? The house knows you're home." It used to feel like the floor itself was happy. Now it groaned like an old secret under too much silence. Footsteps. A shadow moving on the other side. A hand at the latch, then the grinding slide of the deadbolt. It didn't open. The shadow didn't speak. Mia held her breath. "Please," she said. "It's us." The door opened the width of a palm, just enough for cold light to catch the edges of a face. Their stepmother's eyes were dark stones in a white field. Her lipstick left a perfect red line on the rim of a teacup she held like a prop. She looked at the twins the way people look at a painting they don't understand. Flat, unimpressed, waiting to feel anything and finding nothing. "You're late," she said. "We came straight from the church," Mia answered. "The bus. It's past 8. Their stepmother glanced at the old clock in the hall, the one their father used to wind on Sundays with ridiculous ceremony, solemn as a priest. "You should have been back before dark." Mia tried to step forward, but the chain caught and stopped the door like a leash. "We're cold," she said, and immediately hated how shaky she sounded. "Can we come in?" The stepmother tilted her head, as if weighing the idea the way people weigh grocery fruit. "Your father's will has not been read," she said, the words smooth, practiced. "There are matters to settle." "Please," Sophia said, small and raw. "My fingers hurt." Their stepmother's eyes drifted over Sophia's hands, red-knuckled, trembling, then to Mia's thin coat, then back to their faces. She smiled without warmth. "You have cousins," she said. "Aunties. Church people. You're very good at singing hymns. Perhaps someone who enjoyed your voices will enjoy your company tonight." She closed the door to the length of a breath, unhooked the chain, and then for a second Mia thought, but the deadbolt clacked. The porch light went out. The house swallowed its own shadow and left the twins on the steps with the snow falling slower now, heavier. Sophia's breath hiccuped. "She locked it," she said, not as a complaint or fear, but as if reporting the weather. "It is snowing. The door is locked. We are outside." Mia wrapped her arm around her sister and pulled her down to the top step. The stone bit through their clothes. She stared at the doorknob until its brass eye blurred and ran, and when she blinked the tears away it looked like any other circle in a night of circles. The moon haloed, the breath rings leaving their mouths, the useless wreath still hanging above them, green and red and laughing at the idea of comfort. They waited. Waiting felt like a stair you keep stepping onto, expecting the next one, and finding air. There were footsteps again inside the house, but they moved away toward the kitchen. A cupboard door. A kettle. The distant hush-pust of gas catching. Their stepmother hummed something that might have been a hymn but sounded more like waiting for water to boil. Sophia shivered so hard the steps shook with her. She tucked her hands under her armpits and tucked her chin down until the bow in her hair hid her eyes. "It hurts," she said. "The cold hurts." "I know." Mia scanned the street, blue, black, and shining, a line of houses with windows like eyelids half closed against the night. The wind found the space between their coats and their shirts, pressed its knuckles into their backs. Somewhere a dog barked, the sound dry like leaves. A car passed at the far end of the block, slowed, then kept going. Mia thought of their father's hands, how he used to rub theirs between his palms when they came in from snow, like he could polish warmth back into them. He had big hands, but gentle, and he had a way of looking at them that made them feel like answers instead of questions. At the graveside, those hands had been still, resting on top of each other, a thing the world had finished with. The pastor had said ashes and hope and mercy. The wind had said nothing at all. "Maybe we go to Mrs. Larkin," Sophia said. "She gave us cocoa once." "Mrs. Larkin moved to Florida," Mia said softly. "In August." "Oh." Sophia swallowed. "Florida is warm." "It is," Mia said and tried to smile. The porch light switched on again. For a heartbeat, something like relief leaped in Mia's chest and then fell, heavy and embarrassed. The door didn't open. Instead, their stepmother's voice floated through the wood, precise, careful not to sound like shouting. "There's a blanket in the shed," she said. "If you're determined to make drama of the evening." "The key," Mia started, standing, but the light went off, and the house returned to its cold patience. The shed didn't need a key, it needed the knack, the lift-then-pull trick their father had perfected. Mia led Sophia around the side yard, their shoes slipping on thin ice, breath stitching the dark. Inside the shed the smell was old grass and oil and mouse. The blanket lay folded on a nail like a stubborn flag, an ugly thing, gray and itchy, but it swallowed them both when they sat on the floor with their backs to the rake handles and the shovel blade like a moon beside them. Wind fingered the seam under the door and tickled their ankles. Sophia fell asleep in pieces. Jerks and drops and those tiny sighs that children make that sound like apologies. Mia kept awake by naming things she could still promise. "I will not cry. I will not be loud. I will count to 100, and if nothing changes, I will count again." She listened for the kettle whistle and heard it, a thin ghost. She listened for the click of cups and heard that too. She waited for the sound of the porch door opening, the soft call of her name, the human thing. It did not come. The night deepened. Snow found a crack above them and sifted in a thin glitter onto Sophia's hair. Mia brushed it away with a finger, the same motion she'd used once to wipe cake frosting from her sister's cheek at a birthday that now felt borrowed from someone else's life. The first time a car slowed outside the house, it was only lost, its headlights pawing at numbers until it decided they were wrong. The second time, the engine cut, and the world settled. A door opened, slow, deliberate, the expensive talk of a luxury hinge. Footsteps in snow, crisp and sure. Not the street's hurried stabs, but a measured rhythm that came from someone who expected doors to swing open for him and had never been told no enough to believe it. Mia held her breath and shifted the blanket off her ear. The footsteps paused at the porch, then the wood creaked, polite wait, heavy confidence. A knock, 3 times. The kind of knock that had practiced being answered. Mia glanced at Sophia. She was sleeping, lips parted, a blush of cold across her nose. Mia stood, careful not to rustle the rake handles, and edged to the crack in the shed door. Through the narrow slice she could see the porch, the dark door, the black, expensive shape of a car idling steam like a dragon, and a man in a heavy coat, the collar turned up, hair silver at the temples, light pooling around him from the car's interior like a small sunrise that had gotten lost and ended up at their house by mistake. The door opened, wider than for the twins, chain off, deadbolt back. Their stepmother stood framed in the hallway glow, the red teacup smile back in place but straighter now, taut around the edges. "Good evening," the man said. His voice was warm the way a fireplace is warm. Something made to gather around. "I'm sorry to come so late. There was a service today." "A private family matter," the stepmother replied. "If you've brought flowers, the church accepts them." "I find flowers are happier with people than with walls," the man said. He looked past her shoulder, as if he could see every room and the way it remembered the laughter it used to hold. "I came to ask about the girls." "The girls are with relatives," the stepmother said smoothly. The man's gaze slid to the steps, to the snow smoothing itself over small footprints, to the space where a wreath still tried to look festive. He was quiet. When he spoke again, the warmth in his voice had cooled to something precise. "Are they?" he said, not as a question but as the kind of sentence that invites the truth to step out of its hiding place. Mia felt it before she understood it. A small heat in the bones, the animal knowledge that something in the night had shifted in their direction. She put her hand on Sophia's shoulder and felt her sister stir, drowsy, confused. Should I knock? Sophia murmured, half-dream. Maybe if we knock again. Maybe, Mia said. Her eyes flicked to the porch, to the man who had not yet looked away from the door, and to the way the house, for the first time all night, seemed to be listening to something other than itself. If you're reading this and you're the kind of person who can't stand to see little hands shake in the cold, stay with us. Share the story, leave a word for Mia and Sophia below, tell me what you felt, because sometimes the smallest voices need a crowd behind them to finally be heard. The porch light stuttered and steadied, throwing a pale halo over the steps where the snow had already softened into small hills. The man did not blink against the cold. He didn't shift his weight to look bigger. He simply stood there and let the night learn his name. Who are you? The stepmother asked, the smile now taut enough to cut. Daniel Hart, he said. I was your husband's friend. The word friend landed between them like a coin on glass. Inside the house the kettle clicked again, a nervous tick. She started to answer, but Daniel angled his face toward the street and the shed and the hedge that wore a powdered wig of white. He had the kind of gaze that searched without moving, like a lighthouse beam turning slowly, seeing far. Friends went to the funeral, the stepmother said. You did not. I was at the graveside, he replied. I prefer the parts where people tell the truth. He let that sit, then added, I'm here for the girls. She shifted, as if feeling a draft only she could feel. As I said, they're with relatives. If you want to send a card. Daniel stepped closer. The wood of the porch groaned, but in a friendly way, as if it recognized someone who wouldn't kick it. Their father called me from the hospital, he said. Not to ask for anything. To make me promise something. He glanced at the staircase where two small bodies had sat and shivered hours earlier. He asked me to check on them tonight. The stepmother's eyes thinned. Her voice glued itself to a tone that sounded like rules. Promises do not override custody or wills, Mr. Hart. There are procedures. Procedures don't leave children on a porch in winter, he said, and his voice cooled one more shade. Where are Mia and Sophia? From the shed, Mia felt Sophia twitch awake beneath the blanket. The name, both names, moved through the cold like tiny birds finally finding a branch. Sophia's hand groped for Mia's and found it. Fingers numb, grip strong. He knows our names, she whispered, like a little miracle. I will ask you to leave, the stepmother said. You're interfering. I intend to, Daniel said softly. With whatever is cruel. Silence. The snow listened. A distant siren lifted and fell. Somewhere down the block a window shut against the night. Then the stepmother tried a laugh, brittle. You talk like a man who buys things. This is not a boardroom. No, Daniel agreed, and for a heartbeat something like sadness crossed his face. A boardroom is warmer. He stepped off the porch and the snow welcomed the outline of his leather soles. He crouched and studied the steps. Two small indentations where bodies had shifted. A scatter of tiny boot prints leading toward the side yard. He didn't call out. He didn't do anything grand. He followed the prints. Mia swallowed. The crack in the shed door felt suddenly huge. She could either be a secret or a person. She chose. She stood and pushed the door wider, and the hinge made the smallest complaint. Daniel stopped immediately. He turned, not fast, not like a man in a hurry, but with the exact attention a person gives to a sound they've been hoping for all night. The stepmother came off the porch in a rush. You have no right to. Sophia stood too, a small shadow beside Mia, hair ringed with frost like a crown made by winter itself. Daniel's eyes found them in the dark and he exhaled the way people do when they see a shoreline after too long at sea. Hello, he said, as if this were an ordinary evening and they were meeting at an ordinary doorway. I'm Daniel. Mia couldn't make her voice behave, so she just nodded. Sophia lifted a hand that shook even when it tried not to. Back inside, the stepmother snapped at once to the girls and to the night itself, as if both were misbehaving. You will confuse them. We're confused, Sophia said quietly. We're cold. Daniel shrugged out of his coat in a single practiced motion. The night bit into his suit, but he didn't seem to notice. He knelt and wrapped the coat around both girls at once, tucking it like a blanket, the wool heavy and smelling faintly of cedar and something warm, spice or memory. The coat swallowed them, and in that instant the shed, the yard, the street, the house, all the cold edges of the night, felt 1 degree less sharp. "What are you doing?" the stepmother hissed. "Covering them," he said, as if explaining gravity. He studied Mia's face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Just cold." "How long?" he asked, looking at the faint crust on the blanket, the way their breath made little ghosts. "Since after church," Mia said. "The bus was slow." "Hours," Daniel said, but to himself, the numbers locking into place. He stood. "We're leaving." The stepmother's smile finally cracked. "They're not your children." "They were his," Daniel said, and something changed behind his eyes, grief refocusing into purpose. "And he was my friend." "You came to our wedding," she snapped, suddenly pulling history like a defense. "You smiled." "I smile easily," he said. "I believe in new chances. I still do, even now." He met her stare. "But you used the first one poorly." She tried the law again, words like barricades. Guardianship, probate, temporary placement. Daniel let them pass, then answered in simpler nouns. Night, cold, children, door. He took his phone from his pocket. "We can do this mercifully or loudly," he said. A call to family services. A photograph of those steps. "Your neighbors may have cameras." "I'm capable of making a scene, but I would rather make tea." The stepmother's gaze darted to the street, to the houses with their sleeping eyes, to the luxury car that hummed like a patient animal, to the twins, small and wrapped in a stranger's coat that looked like safety. She needed a different battlefield. "And where would you take them?" she asked, pouncing on the practical. "Hotels aren't homes." "Tonight," Daniel said. "Somewhere warm. Tomorrow somewhere right." He turned back to the girls. "Do you have things you need? Shoes that fit? Pictures you want to keep?" Mia looked at the house. Every window was a memory and a wound. She thought of the shoebox under her bed with the ticket stub from the county fair, of their father's scarf hanging on the peg by the kitchen, still smelling of him if you pressed your nose to the wool and tried hard enough to not cry. She also thought of the way the door had opened a palm's width and then closed again. "Just us," she said. "We need us." Sophia nodded inside the coat, a small emperor agreeing to a treaty. Daniel glanced back at the porch as if giving the house one last chance to be kind. It stayed quiet. He led the girls toward the car. The stepmother moved to block him, but he didn't speed up or slow down. He simply reached the door before she reached him and opened it, and warm air rolled out with the faint scent of leather and something like orange peel. The seats looked like clouds that had remembered to be solid. Softer than any bed the girls had known. Sophia slid in first and let the heat find her cheeks. Mia followed, then, after a heartbeat, scooted so her sister could lean into her shoulder the way she always had when their father drove and sang too loud. Daniel tucked the coat around their knees, then shut the door with a whisper. The world on the other side of the glass dulled and blurred. He rounded the hood. The stepmother caught his sleeve. Her voice had lost its edge. "He didn't leave much," she said, almost pleading with the past for a different record. "There are bills. I'm not a monster. I'm tired." "We're all tired," Daniel said, and for a moment the hardness dropped from him and there was only a man at a graveside, late to a promise and trying to keep it anyway. "Rest well. Tomorrow will be words and papers. Tonight needs heat." He got in. The engine changed its mind from idle to purpose. The car glided off the curb as if it had been born to do this exact thing. Carry cold, scared children away from doors that forgot how to open. The city did what cities do at night. It made long rivers of light and stacked them into windows and smudged them into puddles. Daniel drove with the calm of someone who'd already decided to fight and didn't need to talk about it. He didn't ask questions right away. He let the silence warm first. "Seat warmers," Sophia breathed, half laughing at the idea that the world could heat you from underneath. She pressed her palms to the cushion as if meeting magic. Mia watched Daniel's hands on the wheel. Steady, not tight. The left bore a thin scar near the thumb. The right wore a watch that ticked quietly, the second hand a thin, bright line. "You knew our dad," she said. Not a question. Daniel nodded. "Since we were both stupid enough to think we'd be young forever." "Did he sing too loud?" Sophia asked, drowsy. "He did," Daniel said and smiled. "Badly." The girls exchanged a look that felt like breath after holding it too long. A private proof. They crossed the river, the bridge lights trembling on the water like strings waiting to be plucked. Daniel turned off the main road and into a street with old brick buildings that had been convinced to be beautiful again. He pulled into an underground garage and the door purred down behind them, shutting out the weather. "Where are we?" Mia asked. "Home," Daniel said, then amended. "My home for tonight. Clothes can be bought. Beds can be made. Safety, we start now." They rode an elevator that smelled like clean metal and faint coffee. Daniel didn't fill the ride with small talk. He watched the numbers climb and the girls watched the numbers, and when the doors opened, a hallway stretched like a polite red carpet toward a door with a brass plate that said nothing at all. Inside, warmth unfolded. Not grand, not a palace. Just a place built by a person who liked books and light and the way wood feels under your palm when you lean on it to think. A couch that forgave you for sitting. A table with scratches that had stories. A kitchen with a tea kettle that didn't have to boil for anyone but would, gladly. Shoes by the mat, Daniel said, as if they were old rules they'd always known. Bathroom to the left. Towels on the warmer. He hesitated. "You'll find pajamas in the drawer. My daughter used to keep things here when she was small." The sentence opened a door into another room inside him. The kind with lights you don't turn on when you have company. Mia felt the coat slide off her shoulders and realized her body had been one long shiver for hours. The bathroom air kissed the cold out of her skin. The towels were soft enough to make your eyes sting if you weren't careful. She brushed her hair with a comb that had waited for this moment without knowing it was waiting. When they came out, Daniel had set 2 mugs on the table, steam rising in curls that looked like handwriting. He'd added a plate with toast cut into triangles because triangles are friendlier than rectangles when you're 7. "No caffeine," he said. "Honey. A pinch of cinnamon. My grandmother swore by it." Sophia took a sip and made a small sound that was almost a laugh. Mia wrapped her hands around the mug and let her fingers remember what heat felt like when it wasn't borrowed in a shed. Daniel sat across from them, not looming, not interviewing. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll talk to a judge. We'll find a school counselor who understands paperwork. We'll make sure you have what you need and that your father's wishes, written and unwritten, are respected." He paused. "But tonight you will sleep. That's the only rule." Mia studied him. "Why are you helping?" The question wasn't suspicious. It was simply a door that had not opened for a long time, creaking for practice. "Because your father asked me to," he said. "And because the kind of man I want to be would do it even if he hadn't." He glanced toward the window, where the city fell in soft squares of gold. "Also, I sleep badly when I know the world is colder than it has to be." Sophia yawned like a little cat and blinked slow. "Will you sing?" she asked, surprising herself, then covering her mouth. "You don't have to. It's just. Dad used to. Even if it was bad." Daniel considered, then stood and fetched a small battered guitar from a corner. He tuned it by ear, the strings complaining then settling. He didn't sing loud or long. He picked a simple melody and he hummed where the words would have been. It sounded like candles and like porches with doors that open the first time and like promises that show up on time even if you're late to make them. The girls leaned into each other and listened. Sleep came like a tide finally finding the right beach. And while they slept, Daniel sat awake at the table with a yellow legal pad, writing names and numbers in a tidy hand. Attorney, family services contact who owed him a favor, Pastor Lewis who would tell the truth if asked properly, Mrs. Larkin's Florida number he could probably find, the bank manager who had adored their father's bad jokes, the neighbor with the camera pointed at the street. He drew a small square and labeled it Tomorrow. He drew a larger one and labeled it New Life. Then he turned off the lights one by one, as if dimming a theater between acts, and let the city hold its breath for what came next. Morning in Daniel's apartment arrived like a guest who knew how to behave. quiet light slipping through tall windows, warming the wood floors, finding the corners where books leaned against each other like tired friends. Mia woke first, blinking at a ceiling that didn't creak when she breathed. For a second she panicked, forgetting where she was, but then she saw Sophia curled beside her on a sofa that felt softer than any bed they'd owned, Daniel's heavy coat draped like armor across them both. Her chest loosened. She let herself believe in warmth for another heartbeat before the world remembered her. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. Daniel's voice followed, humming the same tune he had played on the guitar the night before. The smell of something toasting spread like a ribbon. It was too good, and because it was too good, Mia tensed. He might change, she whispered to herself, but even as she said it she knew the voice was fear, not truth. Sophia stirred, hair tangled, cheeks pink. "We're not outside," she mumbled, half dreaming. "It's warm." She pressed closer for a moment before opening her eyes fully. "Do we get to stay?" Mia didn't answer. She wanted to. But promises were dangerous. Only Daniel could answer that. Breakfast was simple. Toast with honey, apples sliced into moons, warm milk. Daniel set it all on the table without making a ceremony of it. "Eat," he said. "The world talks louder on a full stomach." The girls obeyed, timid at first, then faster, as if afraid someone might notice and take it away. Daniel didn't stare or fuss. He sat across from them, reading something on his phone, but every so often he looked up and asked, "More honey?" Or "Enough milk?" in a tone that didn't ask for gratitude, only truth. When they finished, he folded his phone closed and leaned forward. "Today we make this official," he said. "Courts, papers, the parts of the world that like stamps and signatures. But before we go, you need to know something." The girls froze. Sophia clutched her cup. "Something bad. Something important," Daniel corrected gently. "Your stepmother won't let go easily. She'll try words first. Big ones like custody, guardianship, inheritance. She might try fear. But none of that changes the fact that what happened last night was wrong. And wrong can't be hidden behind paperwork forever." Mia nodded, her stomach twisting. "She'll be angry." "Angry doesn't win in front of judges," Daniel said. "Proof does. And you, Mia, you told me something last night. That you only needed each other. That tells me your heart is clear. That's the strongest proof there is." The elevator ride down to the garage felt heavier than the one up the night before. The city was alive now. Horns, footsteps, the rush of Monday business. Daniel opened the car door for them, the gesture quiet but steady. "Seatbelts," he reminded, as if he had said it every day of their lives. They drove toward the courthouse, but they didn't make it. Because at the exit of the garage, leaning against a car that wasn't hers, stood the stepmother. Her coat was perfect, her lipstick sharp. She looked like someone rehearsing the role of concerned guardian in front of a mirror until the mirror believed it. When the car rolled to a stop, she approached, smile painted back on. She tapped on Daniel's window. He lowered it just enough to listen. "Mr. Hart," she said brightly. "We seem to have had a misunderstanding." Daniel's hands stayed on the wheel. Children on a porch in winter is not a misunderstanding. "You exaggerate," she said, her voice now dipped in sugar. "They're dramatic little things, and grief makes them fanciful. You should know that." She leaned closer, lowering her tone. "You have no legal right. Whatever promises you think you made, they do not entitle you to steal my husband's daughters." Mia's breath snagged at that word. Steal. It wasn't Daniel who had locked doors. It wasn't Daniel who had turned warmth into a weapon. Yet here was the stepmother saying the opposite with a calm face, like truth was something you could bend until it snapped. "They're not objects," Daniel said evenly. "They walk where they choose." The stepmother bent down, eyes level with the back seat. "Girls," she said, her voice silky, almost kind. "Come out. We'll talk at home. I'll make cocoa. You'll forget this little adventure." Sophia shrank against Mia's shoulder. Mia held her sister's hand, knuckles white. She met Daniel's eyes in the mirror. "Don't open the door," she whispered. Daniel nodded once. "They've chosen," he said aloud. "Step aside." Her smile faltered. "Do you know who I am?" she hissed. "Do you know the lawyers I can afford?" Daniel's expression didn't change. "Do you know how many cameras are on this street?" He gestured slightly. Indeed, above the garage entrance, a lens glinted. "Do you know how a judge reacts to photographs of children left in the cold?" His voice remained calm, but it carried the kind of weight that doesn't shout because it doesn't need to. "Try me." The stepmother's face hardened. The sugar burned off. She stepped back, but not in defeat. More like a retreat to plan another strike. "This isn't over," she said. "Not by a long way." "I hope not," Daniel replied. "Because I intend to see it through." He rolled up the window and pulled onto the street. In the rearview mirror, the stepmother stood stiff and small against the size of the city, her coat too fine for the winter she had created. The girls didn't speak for a long time. The car's hum filled the silence. Finally, Sophia whispered, "What if she wins?" Daniel's jaw flexed. "Then I fight again. And again. Until the truth stops being ignored." He glanced at them in the mirror, his voice gentler. "But she won't win. Not while you have me, and not while you have each other." The courthouse rose ahead, gray stone and high steps, flags shifting in the wind. Mia felt her chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something that looked like hope wearing armor. Courthouses have a way of making even whispers sound official. Marble floors, tall windows, clocks that don't apologize for moving forward. Daniel guided the twins through the security line with the quiet choreography of someone who had already walked the route in his mind all night. He nodded to the bailiff, signed where a clerk pointed, and thanked the social worker who met them at the bench, a woman with soft eyes and a spine made of iron. "Emergency hearing," she said to Daniel in a low voice. "The petition and affidavit you sent at dawn were thorough." "Thorough beats loud," he answered. The stepmother arrived in a rush of perfume and paper, a lawyer at her elbow carrying a briefcase heavy enough to swing opinions. She caught sight of the girls sitting beside Daniel and pasted on a smile that didn't reach anywhere true. "There you are," she said brightly, ignoring Daniel entirely. "Come now, darlings. This misunderstanding has gone on long enough." The social worker stepped between them like a door that knew how to stay closed. "They're with me until the judge says otherwise." The courtroom itself was smaller than the girls expected. No balcony, no echoing domes, just rows of benches and a bench at the front where a woman in black robes read a case file as if it were a map of a country she'd been assigned to govern by noon. She looked up when the clerk called the names. "Hart," she said. "Stevens." Her gaze took them all in at once, weighing, measuring, not impressed by surfaces. They rose. The air felt thinner near the front. The stepmother's lawyer spoke first, each syllable ironed flat. "Your Honor, my client is the surviving spouse. She has borne the burden of grief and household alone. Last night, a well-meaning outsider." "Name?" The judge interrupted without looking up. "Counselor Reed, Your Honor." "Not yours." "His." "Daniel Hart." "Continue." "Mr. Hart interfered with my client's lawful custody, removing the minors to an undisclosed location overnight without consent." The judge looked up then, gaze like a carpenter's square, checking angles. "Mr. Hart." Daniel didn't perform courage. He simply stood in it. "Your Honor, the door did not open. 4 hours." He held out a folder. Affidavit. Time-stamped photographs of the porch steps and thermometer. Statement from Pastor Lewis. Voicemail from the children's neighbor, Mrs. Grant. And, he nodded toward the social worker, a preliminary welfare check report taken at 6:20 this morning. The judge read fast, the kind of fast that means comprehension, not speed alone. She paused at the photos. 2 small indentations on stone, frost clinging to the edge of a thin blanket. Her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Stevens," she said to the stepmother without softening the title, "do you dispute that the children were outside your home last night after the funeral?" The stepmother's eyes found the lawyer, then the floor, then the ceiling, as if a more cooperative answer might be written there. "They were dramatic," she said finally. "They ran off. When they returned, I told them the shed had blankets. It was a test of responsibility. The judge's eyebrows climbed one measured notch. You assigned a test. In freezing weather? To newly bereaved minors. They must learn rules, she said, something bitter seeping into the sugar. Grief makes them wild. One has a tendency to lie. Mia's fingers locked around Sophia's. She felt Daniel's hand, the briefest, steady's touch to her shoulder, like a lighthouse beam grazing a ship's hull just to say, "You are sane." The social worker stepped forward. "Your Honor, with permission?" She held up a USB drive. Footage from a neighbor's door camera. Time-stamped. It shows the children arriving at 7:43 p.m., knocking repeatedly, and remaining on the steps. It shows the porch light turning off at 7:55. At 8:12, the girls moved to the side yard. There is no footage of them being invited inside. The judge nodded once. Admitted. The stepmother's lawyer tried a new path, voice turning sympathetic. "Your Honor, the home is full of their father's memory. My client faced an impossible night. She made a human mistake. Human mistakes are for forgetting anniversaries," the judge said flatly. "Not for making children sleep in outbuildings." She turned to the twins. Her voice softened in tone, not in weight. "Mia, Sophia, do you feel able to answer a few simple questions?" Mia swallowed. Sophia pressed closer. Daniel's hand withdrew. This was theirs. "Yes," Mia said, and her voice surprised her by sounding like someone bigger. "Where did you sleep last night?" "In a shed," Mia said. "Together. With a blanket. We were there until a man came and knocked. Did your stepmother invite you in before that?" Mia looked at the stepmother. She remembered the chain catching. The kettle singing. The hallway light a stripe across winter. "No," she said. She locked the door. Sophia's chin shook, but she lifted it. "We were cold," she added. It felt like being invisible. Silence pooled. The judge let it sit, not as drama but as respect. "Ms. Stevens," the judge said finally, "you will say nothing to these children in this courtroom unless I ask you a question. Sit." She turned back to Daniel. "Mr. Hart, what is your relationship to the decedent?" "Friend," Daniel said. 20 years. We were partners once. He left the company to teach. I stayed. We had dinner every month. He was the kind of man who laughed at himself before anyone else could." The judge's mouth twitched at that, the ghost of a smile that belonged to a different room. "Do you have any written instruction from him regarding the children?" "Not formal," Daniel said. But he reached into a second folder. "There is a letter he wrote to my daughter 2 months ago when she moved abroad. In it, he says if anything happens to him, he hopes I'll check on the little ones like a stubborn uncle who shows up anyway. It is not a will, but it is who he was." The stepmother's lawyer objected on cue. "Hearsay, Your Honor." The judge waved away the word like a fly. "I know what hearsay is, counselor. I also know what character is." She turned to the social worker. "Your recommendation?" "Temporary placement with Mr. Hart," the social worker said without hesitation. "Immediate evaluation of the Stevens home. Supervised visitation only. Counseling for the minors. And, given the circumstances, guardianship hearing to be set within 14 days. The stepmother gasped, almost laughing. "With him. He's a stranger. He is the man who covered them," the judge said quietly. "Last night. When you did not." She signed something with a pen that made a neat, final sound. Order entered. Paper moved like weather. Stamps thudded. The bailiff's footsteps counted the room back to normal. The girls breathed easier because the adults were breathing for them in the right way. On the steps outside, Winter tried one last nip before the sun shouldered it back. Reporters didn't swarm. This wasn't that kind of story. It was the quiet kind, the kind that changes 3 lives at a time. Daniel led the girls to the car without hurry, not hiding and not displaying. The stepmother followed at a distance, calling once, "Mia," like a net thrown too late to catch anything. Mia turned. The stepmother's face was all angles now, The charm peeled away. "You'll regret this," she said, not a prophecy, but a curse she hoped would stick. Mia thought of the shed, of the way snow had settled into her sister's hair like powder, of the porch light turning off as if commanded to. "I already regretted last night," she said, voice steady. "I don't have room for more." The stepmother blinked, stung, then recovered with a sneer. "Enjoy his money while it lasts." Daniel answered before the poison could set. "They'll enjoy safety," he said. "And breakfast. And school. And a childhood." He opened the car door with the same small ceremony as always, which Mia realized was the whole point, to make ordinary kindness into a habit so solid it might as well be a law. Back at the apartment, the afternoon stretched warm and lazy. Papers were filed, appointments scheduled, a locksmith's number saved for later. Daniel made soup, the kind that fills a kitchen with the smell of garlic and thyme. The twins colored at the table, crayons finding blues and yellows they hadn't had words for the night before. Sophia drew a door with a giant keyhole and a key shaped like a sun. Mia drew steps with two small figures sitting side by side and snow that looked like stars because it was kinder that way. The doorbell rang at dusk. Not sharp. Almost shy. Daniel checked the screen and smiled. "A neighbor," he said. "Says she has something for the girls." He opened the door to a woman in a green sweater carrying a tin the size of a drum. "Mrs. Grant," she introduced herself. "I live across the hall. I saw the news. Small news. Building news. I brought cookies." And she lifted her phone. "I emailed the rest of the footage to the address the social worker gave." "Thank you," Daniel said, and meant it like a prayer. Mrs. Grant crouched to the girl's height. "Your father once fixed my radiator with a butter knife and a joke," she said softly. "I'm very good at borrowing sugar. Please knock any time." When she left, the apartment felt larger in a better way. Not empty, but connected. Lights came on in other windows across the courtyard like friendly galaxies. Mia stood at the glass and watched the city blink awake to its evening. She could see the courthouse dome far off, a small dark shape against a lavender sky. Her reflection in the window looked like a girl she recognized at last. Tired, yes, but upright. Behind her, Daniel set 3 bowls on the table. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start school shopping. Shoes that don't bite. Coats that make winter apologize. And if you like, a frame for your father's scarf." Mia nodded. Somewhere inside, the knot she'd used to hold herself together for days loosened half a turn. Tomorrow finally sounded like a place you could walk to. And yet, because stories tell the truth in layers, she knew one more door still waited ahead. The final one. The one that opened not with a gavel or a signature, but with a word only a heart can say. That door would be hers to turn. She looked at Sophia. Her sister grinned, cookie crumbs like stars at the corners of her mouth. "We're inside," Sophia announced, as if the evening required a headline. "We are," Mia said, and the words, simple and entire, filled the room until the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Nights are different when you know you don't have to shiver through them. The girls discovered that the first evening after the hearing, wrapped in blankets that smelled of fabric softener instead of mildew, in a room where warmth came not from huddling but from vents humming steady. For the first time in weeks, Mia didn't wake 3 times to check if Sophia was breathing. She only woke once, and when she did, Sophia was sleeping deeply, her face calm, the little crease between her eyebrows smoothed away. That alone felt like a victory worth writing down somewhere safe. Morning was louder. Traffic horns, a kettle, Daniel tapping a spoon against a mug while making coffee. The girls padded barefoot into the kitchen, still shy in their borrowed pajamas. Daniel looked up and grinned like he'd been waiting for them to appear all his life. "Pancakes today," he announced. "Every new beginning deserves pancakes." They ate until their stomachs hurt, laughing at how syrup stuck to their fingers. Daniel told them stories about their father. Funny ones, embarrassing ones. He did impressions of his terrible singing, and Sophia laughed so hard milk almost came out of her nose. For a few hours, the world felt exactly as it should. Safe, warm, and ordinary. But shadows lingered. Paper shadows. The stepmother hadn't disappeared. She had only been paused by the court. Letters would come. Hearings would continue. There would be battles left to fight. Mia knew it and Daniel knew it. Yet he refused to let fear write the day. Instead, he handed the girls backpacks, new ones, bright colors, and said, "School starts tomorrow. Today we shop for pencils sharp enough to draw new stories." In the mall, people glanced at them, at the man in a suit too fine for a Saturday errand, at the twins in coats still stiff from tags. But no one stared long. They were just another family, which was exactly the miracle Mia needed. They chose notebooks, crayons, shoes that didn't pinch. Sophia found a stuffed bear with one ear bent and clutched it like it had been waiting just for her. Daniel didn't say no. He only nodded, and when they left the store, the bear rode proudly on her shoulders in a paper bag. That evening, as twilight poured gold through the apartment windows, a knock came at the door. Mia stiffened, heart jerking. Daniel opened it carefully, and found the social worker again. She had papers in her hand, but her smile was kind. "Just a check-in," she said. "You'll be glad to know the investigation is proceeding. The footage is clear. The neighbors' statements are clear. The judge's order will hold." Mia exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath since breakfast. Sophia hugged the bear tighter. The social worker crouched and said softly, "Your father would be proud of how brave you've both been." The words sank deep, seeds planted in soil still thawing. After she left, the apartment settled into evening rhythms. Homework pages unfolded. Dinner simmered. Daniel played his guitar again, quieter this time, a lullaby with no words. The twins curled on the couch, the bear between them, and let the music carry them like a tide. Later, as Mia brushed her teeth, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. For the first time, she didn't see a girl locked outside. She saw someone who had survived the night and found morning waiting. She leaned close and whispered, "We're inside now." It felt like a promise that could last. The days turned into weeks. Papers turned into decisions. Courts into conclusions. And slowly the story changed tense. The girls no longer said, "We slept in the shed." They said, "Remember when we had to sleep in the shed?" The past tense was armor. Each retelling made it smaller. Daniel was not perfect. He burned pancakes sometimes. He forgot where he put his glasses. He worked too late on certain nights, phone glued to his ear. But he was present, which was more than perfect. He listened when the girls spoke, even when the words were tangled. He laughed at their jokes even when they stumbled. And every evening he checked that their window was locked, not because he feared the night but because he knew they needed to see someone care enough to check. One Sunday, they walked to the cemetery. The girls carried fresh flowers, blue for Mia, yellow for Sophia. They placed them carefully at the stone that bore their father's name. Mia knelt and whispered, "We're okay." Sophia added, "We're warm." Daniel stood back, giving them space, his hands folded, eyes damp but steady. For the first time, the grave didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a door, one that had led them here. On the way home, Sophia asked, "Do we have to call you Mr. Hart forever?" Daniel chuckled. "What would you prefer?" She thought, "Uncle." Or, maybe just Daniel. Mia grinned, mischief lighting her eyes. "What about Mr. Pancakes?" They all laughed, the kind of laugh that echoes in stairwells and makes strangers smile without knowing why. And in that laughter, something permanent settled, an invisible signature on a paper that mattered more than any court could file. And so, two little girls who once shivered outside a locked door found another one that opened wide and stayed open. They found warmth and safety, and a man who had promised a dying friend to look after them, and kept it. They found the proof that cruelty doesn't get the final word, not when kindness insists on speaking louder. If this story touched you, if you believe no child should ever have to shiver outside waiting for love to let them in, support us by subscribing to Cryspire. Share this story, leave your thoughts in the comments, and help us keep giving these voices a place to be heard. Because sometimes, telling the story is the first step toward changing it.